Hello, everybody. Jonathan Pulley here with West Coast Weather. Today is December 30th, and we're going to take a look as the next few systems start moving into parts of the West Coast. One's already affecting us right now, is kind of moving out and weakening. We got this next one that's going to start that's forming right now over the southern Gulf of Alaska. This will mainly affect parts of California as we go through the next few days, and then we get this next system that will affect more of the West Coast as we go through later next week. We're also going to take a look at some of the details for the New Year's Eve and also New Year's Day forecast. We're also going to take a look at the extended forecast and see what fun things we may expect as we go into early January. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. Now we're looking at the general ridge and trough positions on the European model that's fresh off the press. Here's Alaska, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, California. Here's Hawaii down here. Here's Japan and Russia over here. You can see that our system right now is kind of weakening and moving inland right now. In these systems, a lot of them are just all dying as they move into the coastline because we have this strong ridge of high pressure that's just to our east. So once these storm systems start moving into the West Coast, they start interacting with that ridge and start weakening as a result. But you can see as we go through later today, this kind of weakens and showers start tapering off for much of the West Coast. But you can see for California, another system associated with a cutoff low starts coming in around New Year's Eve. This is going to bring some clouds and maybe some precipitation to parts of the California coastline as we go through New Year's Eve into early on New Year's Day. But you can see the Pacific Northwest is kind of dry during this time with a weak ridge of high pressure over the region. But you can see this next Gulf of Alaska trough start moving towards the coastline. You can see this one little section kind of like moves up towards British Columbia, but the main section moved down towards California on Tuesday in the Wednesday, and this will bring some precipitation chances over much of the West Coast, especially California. But then as we take a look at later next week, this is approaching Thursday and Friday, you can see this rather strong storm moves in the southwestern British Columbia, bring some wind and rain the parts of the Pacific Northwest, and you can see this really large trough of low pressure start forming over much of the West Coast. This is going to be associated with a pattern change to a more cooler, maybe potentially colder pattern as we go through the later end of the first week of January. And we may be flirting with some Arctic air as a colder air mass moves out of Northern California and the Arctic region. There's still a lot of time to work out details with this, and models are still fluctuating, so we're just going to have to continue to watch this as we go. Now look at the European model. This is the ensemble mean, so it takes all 50 European ensemble members and mashes them together to get a good average. This kind of gives us a good view of what the agreement looks like, but you can see it's very similar to the regular European model run. But you can see as we go farther out and see these low pressure systems dip in the California, you can see that the colors start smoothing out kind of. This is because there's 50 different ensemble members, so the farther you go out, the difference in between all the ensemble members is going to grow, and that causes the average to start like weakening kind of. And you can see that the trough is definitely not as strong on the ensemble mean because some of the ensemble members have a weaker trough, some have stronger. So when that all melts together, it creates this kind of smooth out simulation. So that's just kind of some ensemble mean 101. And here's looking at this on the European model. Here's 25 of the 50 European ensemble members. This is British Columbia is up here, Washington, Oregon, California on all of these. And you can see this is about 48 hours out. This is New Year's Eve. And you can see the strong low over the western Gulf of Alaska. And you can see it's on every single one because it's really not that far out, so almost all the ensembles are agreeing pretty well, but you can see some of them have a stronger low, some of them have slightly weaker, so there's still some variation. So each ensemble member has a different starting point of the atmosphere, and this kind of gives us an average of what may be happening, because our just one model could be wrong, so we just take an average of a ton of different variations to get a good average forecast. But then you can see the agreement starts weakening as you go farther out. And if we go all the way out until like January 6th, you can see that there's lots of variation. There's still some kind of agreement, but it's really starts like now it's like all over the place. You got an Arctic high on this one, you got a low pressure moving the British Columbia on this one, so it starts getting kind of wacky as we go out towards the 7 to 10 day range. So it's just kind of good to take the average, the ensemble mean, to get a good idea of what the forecast may look like. So now taking a closer look at the West Coast, here's Washington, Oregon, California, here's British Columbia up here. This is the mean sea level pressure on the European model. You can see our system kind of weakening and moving north and east over the area. And then you can see as we go towards New Year's Eve, you can see this weak low pressure system that we saw on the satellite earlier. It looked kind of strong, but it's going to start weakening as it moved towards the coastline. So it may bring some very light precipitation in the parts of the California coastline, maybe just maybe some of the interior valleys, kind of leaves Washington and Oregon kind of dry. And then you can see as we go through later on Tuesday into Wednesday, you can see this next set of low pressure systems move into the West Coast. The stronger one moves north, and then the main trough starts moving towards California, bringing a low down the entire coastline. We've seen this a couple times in the last couple of weeks, and it's going to bring another good dose of precipitation to a bunch of California, but also some precipitation in the parts of Washington, Oregon, as well in Southwest BC. But if we play it out towards Friday, where that really deep trough of low pressure on the European model was showing, you can see this rather powerful storm on the 12Z this morning's European model run. This would bring some decent wind and rain in the parts of southwestern BC and also western Washington and northwest Oregon. And you can see that weakens and moves inland, but then you can see this big trough of low pressure setting up over the interior mountain west and much of the western US. But you can see some Arctic air associated with a high pressure system up in the Arctic. The cold air creates the high pressure, so we call them Arctic highs because they come down from the Arctic and bring colder air with them. You can see there's a kind of a weak Arctic high moving down over much of the area. This would bring some colder weather, but there's some models that are still not showing this really, so we'll just continue to watch this as we go. Now looking at the 850 millibar temperature anomaly, this is about 5,000 feet in the air. You can see the warm air over much of Canada and the interior mountain west as that ridge of high pressure stays out east. We can see the colder air that these troughs of low pressure that move in the parts of California and the west coast, it brings cooler air in. But as we go towards that stronger system on the Friday, the Saturday, January 5th and 6th, you can see this big wall of colder air moving in with that potential Arctic high and that cold trough of low pressure that moves down over much of the west coast. So there's a chance we can get some pretty chilly air into the region as we go through this time frame. But this is still like 7 to 9 days away, so we have plenty of time to still watch this. So now looking at the European model again, this is 6-hour precipitation totals in inches. You can see today, we can see the showers continuing over the region before dying off later tonight. Maybe some convergence of activity over Whidbey Island and parts of Port Townsend, maybe Bellingham, Mount Vernon up in Washington, as well as we go through early on New Year's morning. That kind of dies off, but you can see by later on New Year's Eve when everybody's celebrating with fireworks and such, you can see much of almost the entire west coast is dry. There's going to be some clouds around as this weak system dives into California, but there's going to be potential for some light rain showers on the coastlines of California, but not that bad of a New Year's forecast, if you ask me. And if we go through into New Year's Day, you can see the entire west coast looks to be dry, but a system will start moving in towards the Pacific Northwest, so some clouds are going to be expected later in the evening on New Year's for parts of the Pacific Northwest. You can see that pair of low pressure systems move in on the Tuesday, the Wednesday timeframe, bring some hefty precipitation to parts of the Sierra Nevadas in California if we play this through, and some precipitation to parts of British Columbia, Washington, Oregon as well. Now looking at the total snow and Kuchera ratio, inches, Kuchera ratio is basically, it takes into account what the temperature is like to get a better idea of what the snow totals are going to be. There's going to be some light snow possible today in the Sierra Nevadas down in California, maybe some wintry driving conditions for parts of the higher passes down there. Not expecting too much with that though. These next two systems are not going to be big snow makers. Maybe the Sierra Nevadas may be picking up maybe up near a foot of snow as we go through later this week, but still not a ton, especially for being in the middle of winter. And if we play this through, you can see some pretty hefty snow events start popping up as that colder air moves down over the region potentially. And you can see some of this gray, like the light snow accumulation starting to make it towards the sea level. This is just kind of fancy at this point, but it shows that there's definitely going to be colder air moving in the region and potential for some good mountain snowpack to start building up, which we really need right now. Now look at the National Blend of Models. This is daily max 2-meter temperatures. This is for New Year's Eve, and you can see it's going to be rather a regular late December day with highs mainly in the 40s and 30s for much of Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. You can see highs in the valleys and parts of the coastline of California getting into the 50s and at low 60s as well. Kind of your average December 31st kind of day. But as we go through New Year's Day as well, you can see the temperatures drop a little more as some of these systems start approaching the coastline, maybe warming up into the mid 60s for parts of Los Angeles down there. And you can see this kind of just continues around this because we're not getting very extreme temperature gradients as we go through later this week. But if we go as that colder air starts moving down the region, potentially you can see the temperatures start dropping on the National Blend of Models. Now looking at the daily 2-meter minimum temperatures, and you can see plenty of freezing temperatures potentially for a lot of the Columbia Basin and Sierra Nevadas in eastern Oregon. 30s and 40s for western Washington, Oregon, mostly 40s and low 50s for lots of the valleys and coastlines of California. This is for New Year's Eve, by the way. This is New Year's Day. You can see lows maybe starting to approach freezing for parts of southwestern Washington, northwest Oregon. Not expecting a widespread frost and freeze event, but it's going to get chilly. Definitely going to get down near freezing out east and parts of eastern Washington and Oregon. Getting down into potentially into the upper 30s, the mid 30s for parts of the northern valleys of California as well. So it's definitely some chilly air as we go through on New Year's Day. Now looking at total cloud cover on the European model, you can see today plenty of cloudiness, but some sun breaks in between as these showers move through. You can see this clears up for a bit before the next weak system starts moving in the parts of California as we go through New Year's Eve. You can see much of the West Coast is under some clouds as the systems move through, but there's going to be some sun breaks for parts of Washington or Oregon, especially if you're out east. So relish any sunshine you get in the afternoon. But on New Year's Day, it's looking a bit better with a lot of California in the clear. Maybe some fog in some of the southern valleys down there. Maybe some residual showers. But you can see the clouds start moving in later on New Year's Eve for Washington and Oregon and British Columbia as that set of systems starts approaching the coastline. You can see this cool feature of what the satellite may look like for just off the California coast on Tuesday evening with that low pressure system moving out. So that's kind of cool. Now looking at a nice graphic from the National Weather Service of Spokane, Washington. This is a weak systems will move through the region Saturday night / Sunday, Tuesday night, and Wednesday, and Friday into the weekend. That Friday system has the potential to be a decently strong system, so we'll continue to watch that. Mainly valley rain, but possibly mixed with snow at times, and light mountain snow is forecast. No significant impacts to travel, which is nice. Here's the New Year's holiday forecast from the National Weather Service of Portland. You can see some rain today, maybe some mixed precipitation in the Cascades. New Year's Eve may be clearing up in some of the valleys with some sunshine peeking out. Some light rain on the coastline, some mixed rain and snow possible in the Cascades. Not expecting too much with that. New Year's Day potential for some light valley fog and then maybe some clearing in the afternoon. You can see some light rain possible on the coast. Not expecting too much with that on New Year's. As we saw, it looks like most of it will dry out by then. Cascades, generally partly cloudy skies as well. Here's a rainfall forecast from the National Weather Service of Sacramento, California. This is for today. A lot of this is already fallen, but still continuing right now. Maybe 1/2 inch to an inch, maybe 1 to 1.5 inches of precipitation parts of the Sierra Nevadas. The valleys maybe an extra, maybe a couple tenths of an inch of rain as well. Here's looking at the snowfall forecast as well from the National Weather Service of Sacramento, California. There's some winter weather advisories for parts of the central Sierra Nevadas up near Lake Tahoe as well. Maybe a few inches of snow out there. Impact is moderate. Some travel delays and slick roads are possible, but not expecting too much. Not a big winter storm. Now looking at the European settlement members for Seattle Tacoma International Airport, SeaTac. You can see that some of the light precipitation from these lows as we go through later this week. Not expecting too much with this, but you can see the likely active weather starts returning to the Pacific Northwest, with the control run getting up towards 5 inches of rain as we go through the second week of January. Still plenty of time to look at all this, but you can see that most of the ensemble members have at least some active weather, except maybe a couple that keep us dry. Here's also max wind gusts as well. You can see some pretty blustery conditions showing up on a lot of the ensemblers. This one actually had 70 miles per hour wind gusts at SeaTac. This is just a fantasy windstorm thing. Some of these ensembles can get a little ahead of themselves, but there is some potential for windstorms as we go through this time frame as well. Here's Portland, a lot of precipitation potentially as we go through in early January as well. Light precipitation this week. Sacramento, California, most of this has already fallen right here, but you can see the potential for more precipitation as we go through later on Tuesday into Wednesday of this week, and maybe some more light precipitation next weekend. Here's San Francisco International Airport, kind of the same idea. Here's Los Angeles International Airport, lighter precipitation down there, which is to be expected because Southern California is plenty drier than Northern California. Now looking at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. This is for January 4th to 8th. You can see near normal for much of the Pacific Northwest, with below average temperatures for much of California as some of those upper level lows move down. But this cold air is going to start approaching the region potentially, so this will start adding some blues onto the Pacific Northwest likely. Here's the 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook, above average for much of the western United States, and this would also include British Columbia as well, as some of those systems move through. Here's the 8th to 14 day temperature outlook. This is for January 6th through the 12th. So this is the end of this first week of January into the second week of January. And you can see they're highlighting much of the West Coast below average potentially as we go through this time period, as that cold air potentially moves down over the region. Above average precipitation for almost the entire United States, highlighted here as some systems start moving into the West Coast and starting to move east towards the rest of the U.S. So a lot of active weather and some potential cold weather is potentially as we go through later into early January. So a lot to look at as we go. Well, that's the end of this video. Thank you everybody for watching, and all those that made it through this video. I hope everybody found it informative and enjoyable. Please just hit those like buttons, subscribe buttons down below, and also hit that notification bell if you don't want to miss out on any new videos I make. It helps the channel out, and I very much appreciate it. Also, have a wonderful holiday. Some light rain maybe is expected for parts of the California coastline as we go through New Year's Eve, but not really expecting much of a stormy holiday as well. So take care, God bless, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend and also New Year's Day.